Whew. I'm a little bit nervous making this video. Okay.
I am not at all nervous about making this video about obsessive labeling. My dear friends, no matter what part of the logic spectrum you were incorrectly assigned to at birth, you can't help having noticed the practitioners of the religion of identity politics waste an inordinate amount of time labeling everyone and everything. There is this mysterious compulsion to put everything into categories, and not just any categories, but those based on power and oppression. Can we blame the cult of postmodernism, or is it just a sad case of incorrect logic, or maybe just a simple pathology? Some would argue that postmodern philosophy is itself a pathology, but alas, I'll leave these diagnoses to my more learned colleagues. One can argue that the social justice bean counting mentality is harmful to individuals in society. They want to categorize and label everything and everyone. That in itself isn't where they go wrong. Instead of identifying people based on accomplishments or merit, things you have some control over, they instead focused on attributes that we have no control over, like skin color or sex, an area hitherto only populated by the traditional racists and bigots. Prepare yourself for a world occupied by the authoritarian left, who are bringing a fresh new look to racism and bigotry. Enough of that brainy stuff. Let's get back to glib superficiality.
I don't identify as asexual anymore. This is a very non-committal coming out video because I am not asexual. I have held onto that label for several years, but I don't necessarily have a term to replace it with. I can already hear people saying, "I told you so, I called it, Milo is never asexual." My change in identity has more so to do with the fact that I have a changing relationship with labels.
Our fellow YouTuber Milo Stewart gets it when it comes to labeling.
Being an LGBT YouTuber, it's kind of scary to not have a label. Like, I feel confident not necessarily having a specific label in my in-person life, but when it goes online, my sexuality becomes part of my brand as a YouTuber or as someone with a social media presence. It's scary and maybe unethical, but my decision to not use a particular label is probably a bad marketing decision on YouTube, because I will not be classified with the bi YouTube community or the ace YouTube community. There's no list of YouTubers that I perfectly fit on for that's not more specific than queer or trans or non-binary.
I'm not going so far to say that Milo is marketing her identity or how she labels herself, mainly because that's pretty much the point of having a narcissistic, self-obsessed YouTube channel and is fair territory. But I want to point out some wisdom recently bestowed upon me from the Odyssey Online. They ask,
why are we so obsessed with labels?
They say, because ultimately we want to feel important and in control. Words to live by, brought to you by the internets. Also, link to all contents are listed below in the video description. The article starts out explaining why we as people naturally turn to labeling to explain things, but what is more important is they give awesome advice on the subject.
If you catch yourself labeling someone or something, stop yourself. Classically condition yourself to stop labeling groups of people, certain relationships, illnesses, or whatever is present in your life at this moment. It is not healthy, and ultimately strays away from the amount of potential that label-less conditions have to offer. Oftentimes, labeling leads to stereotyping. What you think initially about someone becomes how you think about them from there on out, and it is important to stop yourself from putting people in tiny boxes and assuming they have no potential to be anything otherwise. There is already enough hatred, stereotyping, and labeling in this world. So do your research on different types of people and really make it a point to confine them. People are constantly changing, and so should our progressive patterns of thinking. Labeling comes from within, and has nothing to do with the other people involved. What you think about the people and objects you're labeling is none of their business, but has everything to do with you and not with them. So please, Stop confining yourself and others into a box just for the sole purpose of having control over how you are perceived by the outside world.
Very interesting, and please note that Mariah Lotz begins by admonishing us to avoid labeling others, but concludes with the pitfalls of self-labeling. This is, however, not good advice for the far-left identitarians for whom labels are everything. The foundation of the misshapen colossus of identity politics is built upon labeling. Labels for the oppressor class and infinite labels for the victim class, who are legion. It is impossible to negotiate yourself in this culture without having endless labels and categories for everyone and everything.
I'll just start by perhaps stating the obvious, but I think identity politics is everywhere nowadays. And we have seen it so much this weekend, where nearly everybody who speaks in any of the discussions feels the need to preface their remarks by saying, speaking as a woman, speaking as a mother, speaking as an academic. And it's these kind of biological, often biological, but not always kind of assumed cultural identities that have really come to define each other. We use them to define each other. I don't think identity politics is eating itself. I wish identity politics would eat itself. And I think that there are two key things that I'd really like to bring out today that I think are problematic with identity politics, the way it's being framed today. The first is just it's incredibly limiting. It's about defining ourselves based on the most biological, the most boring aspects of our identity and not being able to move beyond that. This is not transformational, this is limiting. Second thing is that often claims to identity are based on victim status, and we become involved in what's termed a kind of oppression sweepstakes, where to be able to maintain our identity, we have to outdo other groups based on who is the most victimized, and I think that's incredibly unhelpful. One very, very final quick point. I actually think the name identity politics is wrong. I think this has nothing to do with politics. I think it's more about narcissism. It's about a complete obsession with the self, and we can't relate to the world other than how we see ourselves in it.
For these third-wave feminists, person A will now have special labels or categories added to their identity based on things they have no control over and cannot be judged by their merits or achievements. It seems that most of the high priestesses of identity politics are affluent or upper-middle-class college students who get to decide which features we are born with or what feelings one has today about oneself are the ultimate arbiters of victimhood status and are ranked on the marginalized class pyramid of intersectionality.
The philosophy of intersectionality. This philosophy now dominates college campuses as well as a large segment, unfortunately, of today's Democratic Party, and suggests that straight white Americans are inherently the beneficiaries of white privilege and therefore cannot speak on certain policies, since they have not experienced what it's like to be black or Hispanic or gay or transgender or a woman. This philosophy ranks the value of a view not based on the logic or merit of the view, but on the level of victimization in American society experienced by the person espousing the view. Therefore, if you're an LGBT black woman, your view of American society is automatically more valuable than that of a straight white male.
One can't help thinking maybe they have a point. I think of a wheelchair-bound person unable to move any part of their body and say, what possible role can they play in society? They aren't going to build a great bridge or run in the decathlon in the Olympics, so maybe there's something to this oppression Olympics. And to be fair, many disabled people will have a truly difficult or maybe impossible time achieving something of value in their lives. I mean, not everyone is going to be a Stephen Hawking. As a matter of fact, the majority of everyone that has ever lived will never reach that level of success. But getting back to labeling, I want to read this tweet of someone who was disgusted by the immensely intolerant male-to-female trans activist Zinnia Jones. Then I will discuss the subject that prompted Zinnia's original tweet.
Christoph writes, when you view people as the living embodiment of their real or perceived negative qualities, as oppressors and the oppressed, us and them, rather than as complicated human beings capable of flaws but also of change, you get disgusting tweets like this one. A homophobe killed herself and now people are all concerned about the bullying of homophobes? Excuse me, but where have you all been for queer people all this time?
And here's the danger of labeling in one tweet. Zinnia Jones is not concerned with the serious issue of bullying, even if, and we don't know for certain if this was the cause, even if it leads to the bullying victim taking their own life. Zinnia Jones is only concerned with one specific labeled group, but there is more. Zinnia Jones, a male-to-female trans activist, is giving voice to the women that Zinnia's ilk hatefully refers to as TERFs. And these concerns of these so-called TERFs are that a man identifying as a woman is indifferent or hostile to the fate of women. The subject of this tweet is the recent death of porn star August Ames, as reported on Age of Shitlords. So it looks like social justice warriors actually caused a porn star to kill herself. Last week, 23-year-old August Ames died, and it looks like it was suicide. The background to the story is that she refused to be in porn films alongside actors who had starred in gay adult movies. It is believed that August Ames was suffering from depression and was being bullied online about the decision she made regarding her own body. Because she did not want to risk her well-being, the social justice crowd labeled her a homophobe, and some believe pushed her into ending her own life. But it doesn't end there, because now we have this hatred towards white people thing going on with the regressive left. It turns up in the most disgusting places. Today I see a post online about the sad, terrifying, and unfortunate death of Daniel Shaver at the hands of a sadistic officer of the law. What is a normal reaction if you think this man was wrongfully murdered? Well, for me and others, you can watch the last video I made, but a person associated with Black Lives Matter has another. Who is the white guy in the photo? Yep, that's right. This post by a Black Lives Matter supporter right below the image of Daniel Shaver with a full description of who he was and what happened to him. Even though the other progressives posting attempted to steer the conversation away from identity politics, the BLM poster had to keep pointing out that this man was white. Why? Because this new movement on the left is replacing good old-fashioned racism and bigotry with another brand that is exclusively directed at the evils of whiteness. Is this recent trend of specific white hatred giving ammunition to the white nationalists and their kind to prove they're now discriminated against? I'm sure it is. Nobody should be surprised that the extremely left, now consumed with labeling the other, is leading to disharmony in the civilized West. The authoritarian left has created a fearful environment for their fellow liberals that few have the courage to speak out against. At risk is the reversal of centuries of actual social justice that was hard fought and won.
When we think about group identity and identity politics in the US, it's not just the way that I think about myself that matters all the time for policy and for, politicians that might want to reach out to me as a voter. It matters what box someone else thinks I belong in. And I think that's where a lot of the tension comes from in the United States when it comes to political issues that are related to identity. Because I think in general people don't like feeling like they've been put in boxes, and people don't like feeling like when someone else believes you belong in a particular box. A lot of times there's a set of, there's like this attached way of thinking that comes along with the box that you're put in the context of US politics and identity in the United States. Most of these boxes aren't just boxes, they're bins that have a bunch of stereotypes etched around the edges of them.
Kathy Young writes an opinion piece on theobserver.com.
This hierarchy of identity politics can lead to some bizarre inversions of progressive values. Thus, because Muslims are classified as marginalized and non-privileged in the West's power structures, critics of misogyny and homophobia in fundamentalist Islam risk being chastised for Islamophobic prejudice. Charlie Hebdo, the staunchly left-wing French magazine murderously attacked in January in retaliation for its Muhammad cartoons, was denounced by a number of leftist critics who felt that the magazine's satirical barbs at Islam, along with other organized religions, amounted to punching down at the powerless. The men with guns who shot 12 Charlie staffers were presumably punching up. The practical effects of such social justice ideology can be seen in the communities where it flourishes, mainly on college campuses and online. It is the reverse caste system in which a person's status and worth depends entirely on their perceived oppression and disadvantage. The nuances of rank can be as rigid as in the most oppressively hierarchical traditional society. A white woman upset by an insulting comment from a white man qualifies for sympathy and support. A white woman distraught at being ripped to shreds by a woman of color for an apparent racial faux pas can be ridiculed for white girl tears. However, if she turns out to be a rape victim, the mockery probably crosses a line. On the other hand, a straight white male trashed by an online mob for some vague offenses deemed misogynist and racist can invite more vitriol by revealing that he is a sexual abuse survivor suffering from post-traumatic stress. Working to correct inequities is a noble goal, which explains the appeal of the social justice movement to many fair-minded people. But the movement in its current form is not about that. It elevates an extreme and polarizing version of identity politics in which individuals are little more than the sum of their labels. It encourages wallowing in anger and guilt. It promotes intolerance and the politicization of everything. It must be stopped, not only for the sake of freedom, but for the sake of a kinder, fairer society.
This really good stuff from Senator Warren, specific, pointed, strategy, opposing specific initiative, how to work it, also talking about science and climate change, really good stuff. And then it fell apart so hard, so badly, that I left truly questioning whether progressives will get it together. Various activists start coming up, and it's all identity politics and self-destructive, non-strategic talking points about the patriarchy and aggressive feminism and speaking as a blank person type stuff. Identity politics failed during the last election, and identity politics couldn't even get enough people out to vote on a single day to defeat Donald Trump. And now identity politics is going to get people in the trenches to block legislation and make calls and send emails and organize boycotts, which is way more energy intensive than just voting. Wrong. It's not going to work. And Bernie Sanders had lots of support from the identity politics types, but it was catalyzed by a focus not on the immutable characteristics you're born with, but it was a class-based critique with the understanding that through class and economics and fighting corruption and cronyism, minority groups are going to be disproportionately helped. The problem with identity politics based on race and gender is that you're not appealing in a similar enough way to broad enough coalitions. The left needs a real plan here for the next 4 years, and it's not going to be catalyzed in any way by ranting about the patriarchy, citing the debunked statistic of 77 cents on the dollar, and talking about as a Muslim woman, ...
Yes, hating white people is the new thing. And take note that the 3 people shown here are Twitter verified, so it is now an accepted sentiment. Many of us realize that the use of labels for people is often used to create an in-group and distinguish ourselves from the other. It is a dangerous path to walk on, but getting back to Milo Stewart thinks labels are just dandy and fun.
It would be a lot easier for me to just come out as bi and then have a community that's easily accessible. I had a weird relationship with sex. I was not interested in anyone sexually, and I wanted a way to find other people who were like me. I feel like I'm losing that a little bit in exchange for having more comfort with the ways I describe myself. In a way, when you're questioning your sexual orientation when you're young, you are given this narrative of the life you're supposed to have as a heterosexual person. And then when you realize you don't fit into that narrative, it can be scary to not have an alternative path. But having another label to describe your experiences with non-heterosexuality can give you a different narrative to follow, and that can be so helpful and comforting and affirming and positive. But I am in a place in my life where I don't need that alternative narrative because I think I've already found some sort of structure for my life.
Being young can be a stressful and confusing time. One way to overcome the difficulties of teen angst and becoming a mature adult is to face the issues that lie in your path, a hard-won journey. Or you can just create new labels for yourself and invent whatever it is you want to be. I think that Milo has realized this and is attempting to be at peace with who Milo is. Milo thinks that labels help us gain acceptance, but at some point you have to learn to just be yourself. Goodbye.
Ah.